Good afternoon. You're listening to Gambling with an Edge. Now here are your hosts, Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
This is one of our irregularly scheduled podcasts. And today our guest is Dennis Rappaport, who was a boxing manager, boxing promoter, and we're going to talk to him. Dennis Rappaport, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
Hey, guys, it's a pleasure for me to be with you.
All right. So you came up in Brooklyn. So tell us about the Brooklyn roots and how your early years created a foundation for your career as a boxing manager and promoter.
Well, I grew up in Brooklyn with so rich in tradition, from games that we played, punchball, stickball, box baseball, and all the other great games that perhaps were unique to Brooklyn. As a youngster, I was always a hustler looking to make a buck. When I was 13, I had 25 kids working for me. And
doing what?
Well, a friend of mine's father sold Viennese cookies. And one day I followed him and I found out the factory. And I became Dennis the Friendly Cookie Man, hired 25 kids, and ultimately distributed to charities who resold.
So you were telling us about you were selling everything from cookies to chinchillas when you were 10.
Yeah, and I was a distributor for Vita. I sold security locks, had a traveling karate school. I was a kid that wanted to make a buck and be independent, and this led me on to various careers.
So how did you get into boxing?
Well, at 7 years old, my father was a huge boxing fan and had come from Canada to the U.S., fought in bootleg fights against professional fighters when he was 15, never lost a fight. He was short, but fearless and very quick, and had a love for boxing. And I remember as a 7-year-old youngster watching Eugene Hairston and Jake LaMotta, and a couple of months later, Sugar Ray Robinson and Jake LaMotta. And I was captivated. I was mesmerized. And a love affair became, from that point on, with me in boxing. And years later, I went to the Nassau Coliseum, and I saw there had been a boxing show scheduled, and I saw a fellow with a trainer's sweater. And I went over to him and introduced myself, told him I'm a businessman very interested in boxing, and if he had anybody that had potential to let me know. I get a call about a week and a half later. They called me down to a gym, and I saw Damon Runyon characters like you only read about. And I was in the real estate business at the time, and all the frustrations and the anxiety of real estate left. And I was in a make-believe world of things you only hear about. So I go into this room, and I quickly identified that I was a subject of a scam. They were going to take this businessman and bring him a fighter that was well past his prime and try to grab as much money as possible. I picked it up, but something happened. Nothing happened on that deal, but that feeling in the gym that's almost inexpressible created an interest. And we started going to gyms and looking for talent. And I first signed a fellow by the name of Ronnie Harris. He was nicknamed Ronnie Mazel Harris. And he was had been an Olympic gold medal winner. And he won it in 1968, the year George Foreman won. And he was 17 or 18 and always a pro. Gil Clancy had managed him and couldn't move him. And he was the first fighter I signed. I remember calling Bob Arum up. I was aggressively ignorant at the time about professional boxing, to say the least. And when I spoke to Arum, he said, Ronnie Harris from Detroit. And I said, no, he's from Canton. He says, you don't know what you're talking about, and hung up on me. Well, I don't take that type of rejection well. So I began to think out of the box of what to be able to do with this fight. And how I represented him. How am I going to get him exposure? So I think we used some innovative and creative things to get him attention. To give you a couple of examples, we maintained that Ronnie was a black Jew and wanted to fight with a yarmulke. I made this request to the commission. They became hysterical laughing and rejected it. I took him to the New York State Supreme Court. We won. And at the last minute, the commission, the night of the fight, had got a stay to prevent him from wearing a yarmulke. It was almost a riot. The crowd was predominantly Latin, and they were offended that the commission wanted to take the yarmulke off. That began the first thing that got Ronnie exposure. It was on talk radio. It was in the newspapers. Fiddler in the Ring, boxing for fights. And that became one of numerous things that we did. Another thing we did was the garden had promised us a bout and had reneged. And as I said, I don't take rejection or no well. So I called up every newspaper, every television station at the time and said, I'm going to show up on, this is on a Sunday, that I'm going to show up on Monday at the offices of Madison Square Garden. They promised me a fight, and then they claimed they couldn't get anyone to fight him. I'm going to show up with a 750-pound gorilla. And if there's no middleweight in the world that'll fight Harris, Harris is so courageous, he'll fight the gorilla. Yeah, the early edition of the Post, there were about 1,000 people outside. To my shock, Gulf and Western, which owned the Garden, must have been embarrassed. Teddy Brenner, an old matchmaker, one of these guys that just spoke this way, real tough matchmaker who was known to make wars, called up my partner and said, what is that crazy man doing? He's making Gulf and Western look bad. And my partner, who was at home, said all he wanted to do was for you to fulfill your promise and get him a fight. And finally, they relented. Harris went out and fought another gold medal winner, Sugar Ray Seals. And that was one of many things we did to get exposure. With exposure, gave us the leverage and the opportunity to get him fights.
And
now, were you also a trainer to Ronnie Harris or just the manager?
No, I was I was the manager. Occasionally with some fighters, I was very hands-on in terms of selecting trainers, in terms of being at the gyms, planning strategy, selecting opponents, things like that. I was a very hands-on guy, and it gave me an excuse to leave my real estate business, which I was in all my life, but it didn't have the same charm, high profile, or the glitz and glamour that I got involved when I got involved in boxing.
so I understand that you had a fight with Ronnie Harris in Argentina where you ran into a number of problems.
Ronnie Harris became the North American Boxing Federation champion, and we had a fight in Vegas against Grayson Toner, the European champion. And at the time, Mike Marley wrote for the Las Vegas Review or Las Vegas Journal. And I said, somebody put something under my door and said that the fix is in, that the judges you can't win this fight. And I publicized it.
Wow.
It put everybody on the defense. Some people accused that I had somebody write a note to myself. Other people say, well, it was a credible source. Well, whatever. Okay. The judges all were very defensive. He fights Toner, And prior to the fight, an ugly incident took place. It was at the Aladdin Hotel, and a fellow I was friendly with at the time was running the Aladdin, and they mistakenly put the dressing rooms right next to each other. And as I was out looking at the audience, a fight broke out between the camps. I heard the loud screaming voices, and I ran in, and my people and the Tonus people were in a fight. They had Jean-Claude Bordier, a former champion, and it became an ugly, unfortunate incident. Now, all of a sudden, CBS screams, "It's time, walk out." I had broken up the fight at that point, but unfortunately, Tonus people were bloodied up. So they're walking in. This is prime time CBS with blood all over their face. And Harris won the fight, but it created a major problem. The winner of the fight was supposed to fight Hugo Coro, the champion, in Monte Carlo, which would have been neutral territory. Because of the reputation, which was somewhat nefarious, according to Aram, of Tonus people from Marseille, France, they felt that everyone's life would be in danger in Monte Carlo.
Wow.
I told Aram I would give him a release of liability, and we would take care of our own security. And he insisted on that the fight take place in Argentina, the hometown of Coro. Again, I don't know if it was Aram's concern of us security, or he felt that it would be a big attraction fighting the Argentinian in his own hometown. Well, we go to Argentina. We're treated royally. It was like literally the event. Monzon had been the champion. Coro was a recent champion. And everyone had treated us royally until the day of the fight. And to my shock and surprise, the following things happened. On our way close to the parking lot, a group of people try to overturn our car. We finally make it to the arena, and myself and a couple of other people were checking out the corners and where Ronnie was going to fight. And we were told that we couldn't be in the corner. And I said, there's nothing in this world that's going to get me out of the corner where my fight is fighting for the middleweight championship. Shortly afterwards, people came, security or police, with machine guns. Well, I wasn't exactly a profile in courage at that point, being surrounded by machine guns. Okay, I left to sit in a seat. Shortly afterwards, his brother refused to leave, was surrounded by machine guns, said that he's staying, and literally they were taking him out. And a lot of people said he would never be found again. My partner, Mike Jones, cooled off the situation. But it was a horrible situation. They made our trainer in between rounds leave the corner. So when the bell rang for the next round, he had to run, or for the rest period, he had to run to the ring. Ronnie Harris lost a split decision. A referee named Bill Tate and a sparring partner were so traumatized by the events, they wouldn't even let us back into the dressing room. It was locked. They were literally frightened for their life. It was a horrific experience. Harris lost a split decision, and if they fought anywhere else in the world, okay, without all these things going on, and Harris was aware of some things, because when he would go back to his corner, he didn't see his cornermen. They were running there. And he was aware of, he must have seen the machine guns earlier on. And he didn't fight the fight that he was capable of. He was super talented. Ronnie wasn't exciting, but he was a tremendous technician. You couldn't hit him in his rear end if you didn't want to get hit. And it was a bitter disappointment. And my first of many situations of guys fighting for a title. That was one that I'm not a gracious loser, and I usually get even. That was one that I never had the opportunity to get even on, but it was a nightmarish situation.
You were involved with Gerry Cooney. How did that happen?
Well, interestingly enough, the fellow Bill Che, who had introduced me to Ronnie Harris, was the first black referee, or one of the, not the first black referee, but among the early black referees. And he introduced me also to Cooney. Cooney had an outstanding amateur record and beat the Russians. He was a young fellow. I wasn't that much older than him. Okay. And we sat down, we broke bread. I had already signed another gold medal winner from that great 1976 Olympic team, Howard Davis, who had won the Val Barker Award as the outstanding fighter in the Olympics over Sugar Ray Leonard and all the other great fighters. And I had negotiated a deal directly with CBS, which was the first time that was done. Okay. Sports Illustrated called it the contract of the year we negotiated, which is a long story, but it was an outstanding deal. And Gerry was from Long Island, knew about the Davies situation. We had gotten a lot of favorable publicity making the deal. There was an instant rapport, and we signed him. And with Gerry, at one point, as he's being developed, and he was very personable, and he had outside the ring, he was very understated. Inside the ring, he would send 3-4 guys, sparring partners, to the hospital a week. It was what happened for the first year. His trainer wouldn't let him spar, so he was being a lot of the guys in the gym. Oh, the poor boy from Long Island, he won't spar, and they were doing, maybe there was 10 sparring partners. As soon as Victor allowed him to spar, he knew they were going to look to take his head off, and he just destroyed him. At the end, he emptied out every heavyweight in the gym. Anyhow, with Gerry, we did another thing. We brought a leprechaun into the ring. Gerry was Irish. And I got to tell you, the first time this fella, leprechaun, if you will, was very nervous. He was so nervous, okay, and he was in the green uniform, and he was going to hex the opponent. He literally got sick, threw up in the bathroom, didn't do any of the hexing, was frozen. But the next day, it made the front page of the Daily News. Little did I know that we created a diva. So his next fight was at the Westchester County Center. We used him again. And he was fighting a guy by the name of Sam McGill. Who in this world could have ever pictured that McGill, a professional fighter, was literally afraid of a leprechaun? Well, I get down to the commission, and one of the commissioners was a former PR man by Ella Fitzgerald years before. And he says to me, I got a 6-page letter from McGill's management about not allowing a leprechaun in the ring, not allowing it. He's very superstitious. So I said, and I was trying to keep a straight face. I couldn't believe he was saying this to me. I said, Marvin, you show me where in the New York State Athletic Commission it rules out leprechauns. That's like Santa Claus. He didn't know what to say. Finally, he said, look, you can let the leprechaun in the ring, but he can't X the opponent. Little did I know that the Leprechaun, after getting all this publicity and seeing him on the front page, this guy thought that he was a star. So I said, go into the ring, but you can't X the opponent. You can dance around a little bit, but, don't give him one of these things and move your fingers. Anyhow, make a long story short, I created a monster. Soon as McGill got into the ring, the Leprechaun starts dancing next to him and starts wiggling his fingers. McGill turned around not to look at the Leprechaun. The commission came over and said, Rappaport, we'll grab your license. And I had to have the Leprechaun cease and desist from taking the opponent. Cooney went on, won the decision, and I think that was the end of the Leprechaun in boxing.
Yeah. So how did you get then the match with Cooney? With Holmes? How did that?
Well, that was Cooney became. He knocked out a heavyweight by him, Ron Lyle, in one or two rounds. He broke his rib with a body shot. Then we were matched against Jimmy Young, who had beat him but didn't get to decision alley, who did defeat Foreman, was a real one of these guys that was a real made everybody look bad. To be very honest with you, I didn't want that fight. I was very concerned because nobody looked good against Young. And often people will say, oh, Cooney fought an old Jimmy Young. Well, if you take a look at Young's record, after he fought Cooney, he beat 5 guys. Most of them were undefeated. Okay. King, this was a co-promotion because I would never get involved with King controlling any part of any fighter that I was involved in. He had Young's people got him in the best shape that he was ever in. Okay. And Cooney destroyed him. They stopped the fight. Young was a bloody mess, and Young almost never got hit in a fight. And all of a sudden, Cooney now is a national star. And at the time, Norton was coming back, and he was fighting a Cobb, but a young Cobb that was 18-0, like 17 knockouts, who had just knocked out Ernie Chavis. We agreed to fight the winner. To our mild surprise, Norton defeats Cobb. We fight. Obviously, we fight the winner. We couldn't fight the loser. And Cooney, in 54 seconds, knocks out one of the scariest knockouts you'll ever see. It was a 1 or 2 punch away from a fatality. The referee was late in stopping it. I jumped into the ring, and all I saw was a white of Norton's eyes. Now, this is 54 seconds. Okay. And then a match was made. And it was the biggest grossing event in one night in the history of the sport. I even think it exceeded the gross of the Super Bowl that year. Okay. It took place in Vegas. They built in Caesars. They built a parking lot. It was in a parking lot. They built an arena. It was every celebrity, every star that you could possibly name was there. It became. Let me give you an example. Cooney was on the cover of every magazine. Okay, you could think of, not only Sports Illustrated and Sport Magazine and boxing magazines, but what I call crossover things that were not oriented towards sports. The cover of Time Magazine, which was a funny story, by the way. On the cover, you see a picture of him and Sylvester Stallone. And if you took a look at the cover, you'd be shocked. Because if you look Stallone isn't tall, and Cooney's about 6'6", 6 feet, maybe almost 6'7". And people always wondered, how in this world do you see them together? And Stallone is almost as big as Cooney. We got to the studio, a great photographer by the name Neil Leifer, who was one of the great photographers, had Stallone didn't want it to be such a big disparity in size. So he stood on a cart. Then we got into an argument. The argument was, hey, look, we don't mind if you want to appear taller, but you're not going to be taller than Cooney. So it finally was resolved itself that he was almost the size of Cooney with the box they used. And that was the cover of Time. Unfortunately, the fight drew more foreign press, more international intrigue. It was an extraordinary event. King, I made King do I insisted on parity, that Cooney, the challenger, get as much as Holmes. As it turns out, he wound up making a couple of $1 million more than Holmes because I had sent auditors and accountants to every closed circuit location. Okay. So I would know exactly the money that was taken in. So King couldn't finagle with the numbers. And interestingly enough, Holmes had heard about that we were hiring it and asked if he could have a copy. Okay. And I said, yeah, it's going to cost about $100,000. Okay. With all the auditors and accountants going out. You pay air. Cooney pays air. The Cooney side pays air. And you'd be entitled to it. Holmes didn't want to go for the $50,000. After the fight, he contacts us, asks for a copy. I said, you could have a copy after you said $50,000. Frankly, he never did, and it wound up costing him $2 million. And it was unfortunately, King was fueling appealing to the worst instincts of people, trying to exploit a black fighter, undefeated champion against a white contender, a tremendous puncher that was undefeated. And it was, first of all, it was morally reprehensible. Okay. Cooney's line was, it's not important if you're black or white, just how you throw your left or right. It made him very uncomfortable. It was not only morally reprehensible, and I come from a background of being an activist for civil rights, where I was almost lynched by the Ku Klux Klan. He wasn't aware of it at the time. Me and King got into in negotiations, demanding parity and a co-promotion that he co-promoted with a guy that had been a real estate partner of mine for years, frankly, and with all kinds of controls on dollars flowing. And, King tried everything. He tried to put on the charm. He tried intimidation. I don't mean to sound like I'm some tough guy, but intimidation. You got no chance of working with me. It was like, forget about it. And it was hard at times. Then King would put on charm and almost do a dance. He was manipulative, Machiavellian. He said, well, why, what is it why are you so leery of me? And I said, because if you had the opportunity, you'd take our eyeballs. Anyhow, make a long story short, King had a great work ethic, was as manipulative as you could ever envision anyone to be, used any and every approach. He did his background. First, he thought that I may be a racist, and, that's why he couldn't manipulate me. I had a partner, and there was a promoter, for all the money involved, so we'll take a little less. I refused. I wanted to try to psychologically work on Holmes' mind and demand parity in person. Anyhow, we're negotiating in Chicago. King must have done some investigation. To his shock, he found out not only wasn't I a racist, but somehow he found out that I was almost lynched by the Ku Klux Ku Klux Klan, and I was very much an activist for civil rights. To my shock, we're negotiating in a Chicago hotel room, and who walks in? The Reverend Jesse Jackson. And he first thanks me for a position that I had taken on apartheid, where I wouldn't allow Cooney to go to South Africa unless it was in front of a viable, uh, uh, integrated audience. And I had to be guaranteed that. King, meanwhile, had sent Greg Page here under a different corporation to South Africa. Anyhow, make a long story short, the Reverend Jackson thanked me and then said, Dennis, if you allow Cooney, who's white, to get as much as the champion Holmes, who's black, you'll be retarding the civil rights movement for 15, like taking it 15 years back. And I looked at Reverend Jackson and I said, look, in all due respect, this is not black. This is not white. We're talking about green. Cooney is the attraction. Holmes was in the shadow of Alley. It was never the type of attraction that Cooney is. Now, when you talk black and white, the reality is Alley was black, was the biggest attraction in boxing. Sugar Ray Leonard was a contemporary of Holmes, was a far bigger attraction because he had charisma. I said, Cooney has the charisma. Holmes has the belt, and that's the only reason we're even agreeing to parity. He looked at me, he looked at King, and sort of said, this isn't going to work. Put his palm on my forehead and said, Lord, bless this crazy man, shrugged his shoulders at King, and walked out. And that's part of what happened with the Holmes-Cooney fight. Unfortunately, I think it was the 13th round, Cooney was stopped. The fight was originally set for March, was postponed until June because Cooney had a rotator cuff injury. And King was trying to put the pressure for the fight to still take place in March. And I would never allow a fighter of mine, to go into a fight with a serious injury. So me and King really had a furious thing. I wouldn't allow it to happen, and the fight was postponed in June. And unfortunately, several things had taken place. After the Norton fight, the Hollywood crowd came around. Too much partying and some inner demons that Cooney faced. And it wasn't the same Cooney that fought Norton he was
Young and
engaging
Lyle.
what?
So you were looking for a name. He fought Young and Lyle before Norton.
Yes, Jimmy Young, Lyle, Philip Medino, Dennis, who I don't know, was like 35-2. Eddie Animal Lopez, who had I think a draw with Spinks, or some tough guys. A lot of people give me more credit than I deserve and how I maneuvered Cooney, etc. The reality is Cooney had a tremendous amount of talent and charisma, was very personable, and although unfortunately we're not in contact, like I thought that we had a very close relationship, and it sort of saddens me that we drifted apart somehow over the years. But Cooney's greatest triumph wasn't in the ring, was in attaining sobriety, and from some self-destructive things. But he's solid. He's financially secure. He's on Sirius Radio, and he gives back, tries to help fighters in need, and he's lived a life that matters.
Now, you had dealings with Donald Trump in the boxing business too, right?
Yeah, I did. It's back in the when we announced the Spinks Cooney fight. The fellow who controlled Spinks, who had beaten Holmes, was a fellow by the name of Butch Lewis. Butch was a charismatic guy, but if he had the leverage over you, okay, he was impossible to deal with. But occasionally he would wear a tuxedo with a bow tie without a shirt. I had no idea that this press conference that was going to be held at the plaza, that he was going to show up in a tuxedo with a bow tie without a shirt. But knowing that he had several times done this, I got one of my guys and I took a long shot and I said, go get us buy a tuxedo shirt. Little did I know, he shows up in a tuxedo, bow tie, but without a shirt. And he gets up, and at the time, Trump owned the plaza, and he gets up and says, I want you to know, if you're wondering why I'm not wearing a shirt, in negotiating with Trump, he literally took the shirt off my back. Now, now it's my turn, and I bring a paper bag, and I didn't know Trump. I knew Trump. I know you better than I knew Trump at that point. You follow? And I come up and say, I want you to know what kind of class act he is. He said to me, he believes every man with taste should wear a tuxedo without a shirt. And he asked me to give this to you. And I presented Lewis with a tuxedo shirt. Well, Trump asked a fellow by the name of Mark Edis, who was from the Grossinger family, but now is working with Trump. May he rest in peace. He died in that plane crash with several of Trump's executives. Who is this guy? Who is this guy? Trump, being the narcissist that he is, he said, well, that's Dennis Rappaport, and he's in the real estate business, and he's a real good client at our hotel. You know, he likes to play. And after that, I received a call at my hotel, and a voice says to me, hey, how's everybody treating you? Now, how's everything going? I was clueless who it was, but I have a habit. My habit is, instead of saying, who is this? I figure I'm going to catch the voice and know who it is. Finally, this guy goes on and starts bragging how he outmaneuvered Merv Griffin and all this. And I put together, that's Trump. He said, so how do you think we're doing? I said, you're losing a lot of money unnecessarily. He says, well, what are you talking about? I said, your elevators are antiquated. And I said, you get an average, a big player. If he has to wait 10 to 15 minutes every time he wants to use the elevator, you realize the amount of time you're losing from the table? That night, a psychologist who I had worked with some of my fighters, a sports psychologist, was in the lobby, getting into the lobby, into the elevator. And who was there? Trump, his wife, a couple of executives. And it must have taken him a while for the elevator to get there. And he happened to have been in my suite, Colombo, when I was talking to Trump. Anyhow, make a long story short, Trump is screaming at them, he's absolutely right. This is completely unacceptable. Do you realize what we're losing? Well, from that point on, all of a sudden, we got invited, myself and somebody that later became my wife. He invited 6 couples to Mar-a-Lago when it was his personal residence. We invited on his boat, parties, etc. And, this was, and for some reason, I remember after Spinks and Tyson fought, my sister-in-law, may she rest in peace, used to run junkets from Youngstown, Ohio, and Cleveland to the Taj. So she had a whole bunch of people from Ohio. Trump walks into this private club, and all of a sudden, the person he walks over to is me. And we get into a whole conversation, and he tells me how busy they were, but they didn't have a great hold. They went through a period of bad luck, etc. Anyhow, and everybody is wondering who's this guy that Trump was talking to. And now he isn't too fond of me because, frankly, uh, 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 I'm not, I make accusations of being an insurrectionist, a sociopath, a narcissist, Putin's puppet, etc. So where we once had a friendly relationship, and I don't want to really, this isn't the place to get into politics, but let's just say our political views are very, very different.
Mm-hmm. Now, who was Mitch Blood Green?
Mitch Blood Green. What a character. Unforgettable. Mitch Green. He stood about 6'5", 6'6". He used to like to take his shirt off and show his muscles. He once, there was a gas station on the Grand Central Parkway. He once took over the gas station, chased the attendant as people pull up for gas. He said, how much gas you want? $10, $20, give it to you. Put your own gas in until the police came. Mitch had spent a lot of time in and out of jail, and there were rumors of angel dust and what have you, getting high. He was a great amateur who could knock you out with one shot, but for some reason, something happened in the pros, and he didn't have that lethal power. He fought Mike Tyson, went to distance, ran after Don King, chased Don King into the kitchen, always feeling that he got beat for money and all this. And he was, someone had wanted me to get involved in promoting him. A guy from Chicago signed him, and I really didn't want to get involved. Finally, I get involved, and I got to tell you something. I found him to be, there's a Jewish word, it's called meshuggah. Yeah, it could be meshuggah, but I sort of found him likable. One day we walk into the garden, and I have him wear a Don King wig, okay? And the place went crazy. Presidents of corporations, before that we were in a private club, were asking him for an autograph. It was, and I gave him a line. They'll call him Mike Tyson, call him Cicely Tyson. And he would go on, he wants a rematch and all this with Tyson. Anyhow, one day in Harlem, coming out of Dapper Dan's, a clothing store, is Mike Tyson. Green hears he's there, takes his bike, rides over, and confronts Tyson and becomes belligerent. And Tyson hits him a tremendous shot with his fist. Green goes down. Tyson gets ready to get into his car. And all of a sudden you hear this Mitch saying, "Sissy, you're a sissy. You're Cicely Tyson, not Mike Tyson. You're running away." And Tyson comes back and hits him 3, 4 shots, tremendous shots. And he figures Green is out and he's about to get into his car again. And Green says, "You ain't shit. You're running away again." And Tyson this time comes back again, hits him with 6 or 7 punches here, there, every shot you could think of. Shots that would send people to the hospital, they'd be unconscious. And he walks away figuring this guy is going to be out for 10 minutes. As I said, you ain't shit, man. You're no like Cicely. Then you want Mike? This time Tyson gets into his car. Interestingly enough, about a week and a half later, Mike is out for dinner with a young lady from Africa, a very attractive lady, and they're going to a nice restaurant in Harlem. All of a sudden, someone says to him, "You won't believe who just pulled up in his bike, Mitch Green." And Tyson is saying to himself, "Oh my God, don't let him ruin my evening. Please, please." Unfortunately, nothing happened. Now, to end the story, what happened with Mitch Green? Mitch Green, they were after me to sign. Mitch Green's record with me was 0 wins, 0 losses, 0 fights. I took him to Youngstown, Ohio to set up a fight. We had a press conference. After placing, we went to, he would take off his shirt. And somebody said, "Look, you could sign, you could eat whatever you want. You're a friend of Dennis's out of respect. Okay. But don't take your shirt off again." And these were 2 guys. One was a fella whose name was Joe Louis, but not the Joe Louis, who had his nose must have been bitten off. And one was a fellow by the name of Bernie, who was, I think, wound up dying in jail. A very good-hearted, but a dangerous guy. And he told Green, "Look, next time they'll send you out in a pine box." Okay. I've asked you now several times. You can't go into public establishments and start taking off your shirts. Anyhow, Green went to Youngstown, went there for press conference. I couldn't get him into a ring. Many years later, I had a heavyweight named Melvin Foster. Someone called and said, "Will you fight Mitch Green?" I said, "Yes, of course, but you got to have a backup. I don't think he'll ever get into the ring." And actually, that time he did. I no longer promoted him. Foster beats him a decision. Green was he was a character. If you read about him in a book, you would say, "That's fiction. It could never happen." But for some reason, I got a kick out of him in many ways. And but again, never got him into the ring. I had a promotional deal. It didn't matter. It was, at the time, whatever I did, I couldn't, get him to show up for a fight. And the Mitch Blood Green was certainly an unforgettable character.
Now, you were a manager for most of this career, but then you became a promoter. So how did you decide to change?
Well, initially, after Cooney retiring, he wanted to know what direction his life would go, what to do. He had fought most of his life. And I said, "We'll form a promotional company called Super Fights with another guy named Jeff Levine." And I really love managing. I love being at the training camp, and I didn't love being up all night trying to get new sparring for Cooney, because he went through sparring partners like you would go through, like you would have food. You follow? So anyhow, that's originally why. And there was a whole long story. There's a lot of polarization and divisiveness, some undermining going on. And that created some polarization. There were people were manipulating things, and that created problems between me and Cooney. And ultimately, in promoting, between management and promoting, I managed or promoted 5 heavyweight champions, some for very short lengths of time, some after they were champions, some before they were champions, or some while they were champions. and also co-promoted for a while Macho Camacho and a lot of well-known names in lower divisions. It was boxing at its best could be something like poetry in motion. It could be Picasso. It could be Mozart. It could be Beethoven. It could be an art form. At its best, it could be cruel and ugly. The politics of it, the hypocrisy of a lot of these sanctioning organizations and their money grabs, and the multi champions in each division by the same organizations. The hypocrisy. I met some very fine people in boxing, some quality people. I met leaders of countries, met some celebrities. I can't even begin to tell you how many I became friendly because of my exposure in boxing and people I met, and also a lot of sleeves. So it hit the whole spectrum. That's why I refer to it as Damon Runyon. But let me just say this: there were so many magical moments, unforgettable memories. I've seen fighters traveling the boulevard of broken dreams and blighted hopes. I called one the Cinderella story. Oleg Muskayev. He was stopped 3 out of 5 times, and I got a call. His trainer told him to retire. His promoter released him for nothing. They thought that he had a yesterday, but had no more tomorrows, and was looking at life through the floor of the toilet. I'm not going to say a lavatory. And I got a call from Victor Valley Jr., son of Victor Valley Sr., who trained most of my fighters. And he says, I think I see something. And I had them bring him over to my place. And in my building, there's a gym, a gymnasium, just a state-of-the-art gym. And there was plenty of room. And I looked and I took a shot. And from a guy, the boxing world was laughing. Why is Rappaport getting involved with this Messiah? He's shot. He's got nothing. Well, between a sports psychologist, between bringing Victor in to teach him, between him motivating him, building up his confidence. Remember, he was stopped in 3 of the last 5 fights he had before he got involved. A couple of years later, his hand is raised. He becomes heavyweight champion of the world. And I'll never forget, at the post-fight press conference, I was exhilarated. I call this the greatest comeback in boxing history. They did a story about James J. Braddock, and they called it the Cinderella Man. Well, Oleg's daughter said, Daddy, you're the real Cinderella story. And at press conferences, I would talk about the Cinderella story. And I said, in the words of a famous crooner, Frank Sinatra, and he said, wrote a song about high hopes. And he said that with high hopes, even an ant could move a rubber tree plant. Nothing is impossible. The only limitations are the limitations that we put on ourselves. Dare to dream and dream big. And tonight, all the naysayers, all the doubters, all the people that said the impossible, said it was impossible. Well, you've seen an example of the impossible becoming a reality. Oleg Muskayev, this heavyweight champion of the world. And it was just exhilarating.
Well, that seems like a perfect place to wrap this up. And it's very clear, we can hear your real love of the sport coming through without question. You're the poet of the gym.
I thank you, and it's been a pleasure to be with you guys. It's been fun.